My name is Sam DeCillis. I'm the Tax Credit Program Coordinator here at the State Historic Preservation Office of Ohio, meaning that my role is to assist new and returning tax credit applicants with any questions or concerns they might have. To that end, OHSHPO has created a series of informational videos for people designed to go over the key points of the tax credit process, and I'll prepare you in case you are interested in applying. This video is focused on the Part 2 of the tax credit program, as well as the standards of rehabilitation, holds, and basic submission requirements. You can see a Part 2 cover sheet on the left here. Now, what does a Part 2 entail? Basically, a Part 2 will be describing all the planned work to the property. Even work that's not being paid for with tax credits must be described, as NPS evaluates entire projects. Now, for that Part 2, to both simplify the application and to ensure that all work is included, most applicants break up the work into categories known as work items. In other words, windows would be a work item, masonry would be a work item, HVAC would be a work item. Within each work item, you will then describe the current condition of that part of the building and what you plan on doing with it. Including details and measurements with these is required. Upon receipt of your Part 2 application, a SHPO reviewer will review your work descriptions, and if there are questions of additional information needed, your reviewer will work with you to ensure a successful recommendation based on the Secretary of the Interior standards of rehabilitation. So again, these are the possible outcomes here for a project: either approval, approval with conditions, or denial. Elevation drawings, I'm just going to touch on briefly. These are required for most projects. If exterior changes are being planned, you must provide elevation drawings of the building showing architectural details and measurements. In addition, you may be required to provide renderings and/or physical mock-ups of the building to show how visible new additions or alterations may be. You can see an example here of an elevation drawing. This is the kind of thing SHPO is looking for as far as the dimensions, as far as the labeling, as far as the level of detail. Now here on screen, we have the Secretary Standards of Rehabilitation, all 10 of them. So I'm not going to read the standards in this presentation, but you are encouraged to review them at your leisure and let us know of any questions. These standards are fundamentally our only review metric. They are the measure by which SHPO evaluates all historic tax credit projects, state or federal. And to sort of summarize, the standards focus on material and visual impact. So material impact are referring to the components of the property that are original, that date back to that property's original period of significance. Now, I should note, the standards do not compel applicants to take action. However, when action is taken, it must be in conformance with the standards. I mentioned that the standards take into account visual impact. So how will the proposed work at the end of the process look? How will it be compatible with the historic building? It is always recommended to retain historic fabric unless it is beyond documented reasonable repair. Again, I should emphasize documented. For any kind of replacement that's taken on, applicants should be sure to take very extensive documentation of it in order to ensure they have a strong case for it as opposed to merely repairing. Beyond this, the standards direct that changes made should not give a building a false sense of history. And then ultimately, the rehabilitation should be one that retains historic materials and has a compatible visual impact. Now, your SHPO reviewer, as far as applying the standards, will work with you to ensure that you have met the standards with your application. Will ensure that both for the federal and state programs that the project meets those standards. SHPO is ultimately the final review authority for whether a building is historic and whether it meets the standards for the state tax credit program. However, ODOD makes all final award decisions. SHPO was not involved in any of those financials, including scoring. So for the federal historic tax credits, by contrast, the National Park Service is the final review authority with respect to whether a building is historic and whether it meets the standards. That being said, SHPO communicates regularly with NPS to ensure we're all on the same page, and we have a good track record of our reviews being aligned with NPS's. Now, beyond this, it's essential that applicants include sufficient details in order to make an informed recommendation. As such, SHPO has compiled a list of basic submission requirements to basically give you a sense of the level of detail required for these different components of the building. So you can see here, for example, when it comes to HVAC and plumbing, if you're going to be concealing systems above or within ceilings or walls, you should provide in your narrative the dimensions of the largest system being threaded through those walls and the dimensions of the space available. Let's take another example. Let's say you have a storefront that is altered and not historically compatible with the building. You have the option of leaving that storefront on because you did not conduct the insensitive work, but if you do decide to rehabilitate the storefront, we would need you to have dimension drawings and a detailed narrative to understand what changes were made to the property. Now to take another example here. So when it comes to windows, for example, you must describe whether or not the windows would be beyond reasonable repair, and you must provide documentation for that. So if you do intend on replacing any historic windows, justification for that replacement, including showing level of deterioration, should be submitted with that Part 2 prior to the initiation of window work. And just to touch briefly back here on a rooftop work as well, if you're planning on making modifications to the building facade or the rooftop, you may need to provide renderings or mock-ups to show the visibility or lack thereof, basically to show from a reasonable distance whether or not this will be compromising the building's visual impact or whether it's ultimately compatible to the historic building. Take another example. If there is needed masonry work, for example, like repointing work or kind of replacing bricks, anything like that, you were asked to provide in your narrative the percentage of impacted masonry along with a description of the work, close-up photos, and elevation drawings showing the areas of impact. Now we can see here, this is an example work item, and I've taken this from an earlier tax credit application, and the goal here is basically to show you how the process of working with SHPO, how it works. So basically how a tax credit application can become more detailed and ultimately meet the standards even if it doesn't initially. So just take a look at this work item here. This is masonry. So you can see in their description of the feature and its condition, there's some good details here. They mention the red brick with the limestone lintels. They mention, that's on the front facade, that these details are. They mention on the stucco, there's the rear facade. However, in the description of what they're going to be doing with it, this description is really not sufficient for SHPO's purposes. So, for example, here you can see they're going to be repairing the mortar joints per the preservation brief. SHPO doesn't like language like per the preservation brief or cleaned using the gentlest means possible, because it's ultimately subjective. This just isn't sufficiently descriptive for SHPO and NPS to understand what the impact will be on these historic materials and what the end result will be. Now let's take a look here. So this is the revised part 2. So this is the revised work item, I should say. So this is after the reviewer had talked with the applicant about the project, after they'd explained to them, what areas of that work item need to be expanded on, and then the applicant revised it and resubmitted it. And I've used red text here to highlight the areas that were modified. So you can see here, there's been some substantial changes. Rather than merely citing those preservation briefs, now they're saying explicitly they're going to be using hand tools for those mortar joints. They said they're going to be cleaning the limestone with that non-ionic detergent. They emphasize it's going to be water rinsed at garden hose pressure with the hose pointed down. They emphasize no damage will be taking place during the process. Overall, you can see it's much more comprehensive description of the work being done. This is the level of detail SHPO is looking for. And I'm not saying you need to use all of these exact treatments on your property, just that when you're describing treatments being done, this is the level of detail and concreteness that you should be looking for. Now, as far as holds go, so when you submit that Part 2 application, your reviewer will take a look at it, and they'll determine if any additional information is needed. If it is, they'll prepare what's called the hold letter, and they will contact you to walk you through their questions. This helps with understanding from both sides. Your SHPO reviewer will basically flag any areas of the application that they think may need to be fleshed out or revised, at which point you will then have the opportunity to resubmit the application. And so the review clock, so typically reviewers have 30 days to complete a project once it's been received. If a hold is sent out, that review clock resets. So then once new application material is received, we'll start back over again. When responding to reviewer placed hold and or when revising information, you must resubmit the full application in its entirety as opposed to only submitting the part that's changing. This helps better facilitate the review process. These revisions must be color-coded, just to make those revisions clear, and they must be confirmed by the applicant that the only changes are those color-coded items. As far as starting rehabilitation work goes, so we strongly encourage applicants to not start construction work before their Part 2 application has been approved by NPS for federal and for combined state-federal projects. Any work done before receiving approval is ultimately done at the owner's own risk. If it does not meet the standards, it may subsequently require remediation. Remember, for the state tax credits, applicants are not permitted to have completed more than 25% of rehabilitation work prior to the application submission, and all work must meet the standards. That being said, there may be opportunities for emergency stabilization work. Let's say the roof in your building has a hole in it, but still, you should consult with a SHPO first. This kind of work, it's the sort of thing that will be time sensitive. Maybe a hole in the roof, walls danger of collapse. But ultimately, this should still be very clearly documented when you're reaching out to SHPO. Now, as far as project timelines and resubmissions, so Part 2 approvals remain in effect for a 2-year or 24-month window. Similarly, a completed pre-application meeting can satisfy a project's pre-app eligibility requirements for up to 2 years. If there have been more than 2 years since any formal activity on a project, such as a Part 2 or an amendment, applicants are required to submit a new Part 2 and hold a new pre-app meeting with SHPO to continue pursuing tax credits for their property. Thank you for watching this presentation. If you have any additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. My email is sdecillis@ohiohistory.org. My phone number is 614-298-2028. Otherwise, you can feel free to check out some of the other videos for more information about the program. Thank you, and have a great day.